Okay, so this is an unlisted YouTube video because I have not gotten to the topic of React yet. I have many videos I'd like to do before I get into React. And as far as this demo, it's an unlisted demo for the React workshop that occurred. I wanted to do this real quickly and do it step by step in a video on my own time that I could post with the documentation of all of the links and the resources, as well as kind of a step-by-step process of how to do this in your own machine. And hopefully we won't have any of the issues we had during the workshop, just because things happen and sometimes you're not as prepared as you'd hope to be. So the first thing is we have opened the React documentation. This is not in this workshop that I had done, as well as in general. I haven't done anything on the full process of learning React or any tutorial on that. I plan to do that in my YouTube, on my YouTube channel when I get to React, but there's a lot of stuff I'd like to cover first. You can see here's the main concepts, kind of the basic of what it is, how it's actually injected into HTML using React DOM packages method.render and passing in either a component or a HTML element, and it's actually inputting it into the element that is in your public HTML file that has an ID of root. Now that being said, there is also advanced guides on these documentation, and some of the stuff I've noticed is like slightly behind, but for the most part the documentation from Facebook is very good for discovering things with React and questions you may have. Now we are not going to be using the straight documentation for React or setting it up from scratch. We're going to be using Create React App, which is a project maintained by Facebook, and which is great. Basically it gives us everything that we need to create and bootstrap a React application right away with build tools like Webpack, as well as and Webpack for code splitting and performance and optimization, and also further aspects that we need. So that being said, we can go ahead and use this, and there is great documentation from Facebook on how to get this started. And essentially we want to make sure that we are using the Create React App CLI, which is meaning that it has to be installed in our system. And we're actually going to use this command to start it. So all of this starts with our terminal. So I'm going to open up iTerm2, which is my terminal. It's a terminal emulator I have videos on my channel. But if you're using a regular terminal, you should be fine. There's no differences in what we're doing here. So we're going to go ahead and paste this. We're using npm. You will want to have npm installed. You can install npm a number of ways. You can install it via Homebrew, which I have a video on how to install Homebrew elsewhere on my channel. And then we're using install, this keyword to specify we're installing something. And then we're using -g to specify globally. So it's not going to be in this particular directory's location of desktop coding directory, demos directory. So we're going to press enter on that. And npm is going to install everything that Create React App is that we're going to be using. If we actually go to github.com/Facebook, you can see that there should be Create React App. This is the actual source code of everything that is compiled so that you can use Create React App. There's also a user guide here. It has everything that you need to take step by step to actually create this project and get going, and it tells you what you get in the application. It even has a command how to get into it and how to start it to open it up in your browser. So now that we've installed Create React App, we actually want to create a React app in this location. So we're going to do that by using the commands that it states, which is pretty straightforward in our documentation, which is we use npx create react app my app. So we're going to use npx create react app, which is us referencing what we just installed, and then we're going to call it what we want, which in this case we are going to call it React Demo. So it's going to create a new React app, and yarn, which is, in other words, just think of this as npm. It does a lot of things under the hood that are different than npm in some sense, but under the hood it still is accessing packages from npm. It's just trying to do it in a way that's more efficient, and also trying to make sure that everything that gets installed actually needs to be there, because there has been issues in the past where dependencies were being delivered and creating bloat and adding things into projects that didn't need to be there. So you can see once we've done this, we get a success that Create React App, which we installed globally on our machine, the CLI, has created a React project, and it even says we can just use yarn right away. Now, it will tell us that we need to go into this before we can start running it. So let's do that. We are going to change directory into our React demo, tab for auto completion. And if we actually clear this and do ls to see what files are in here, you can see we've got a README that comes in with this. It is already a packaged JSON file, which means we have access to NPM and different dependencies. And then we also have the node modules have already been installed. Yarn has already installed all of the node modules. We also have a public directory, a source directory, and then a yarn lock file. So if we want to actually open this up in our editor, I'm using VS Code, Visual Studio Code, so code space dot is how I have set it up. You can also open it up using Finder. You can see that we have a project that has a number of different files here. Now, real quickly, what I am going to show is that we can use yarn start to run a script that is provided in our package JSON. We want to open that up here. Localhost 3000. And you can see we have already running a React application. This is really cool, very powerful, very fast. We've already bootstrapped an application that's running in our browser in a local environment. So if we come back here, the reason we were able to do this is because Create React app created a package JSON file with dependencies already pre-installed based on a specific script version that's maintaining this. And then there are some scripts for starting, building, testing, and ejecting. Now, ejecting would be essentially opting out of any updates that are made from the team at Facebook that manages Create React app, as well as we have start for actually running locally. We can run this using npm run start script, or we can use yarn because yarn is involved with a yarn lock. We can use yarn space start to run locally, and that's what we did. So that's how we access the ability to run the application. At this point, we have a localhost in our browser. If it didn't pop up, it should auto pop up when you run the script in a certain browser. It did it in the wrong browser for me. And so I went ahead and just installed it here. And then you can see that we get a number of files. So the first thing I want to bring up is the public directory. In the public directory is an index.html. And you can see here that this is created by Create React app. There's the title. And in here you can see all that exists is one div, and that div has an ID attribute of root. Now if we look in the source directory and look at the index.js file, we can see that these projects that Create React app bootstrapped, including all these files, actually imported in React, imported React DOM package that it also installed, a CSS file, as well as an actual component, which we'll cover in a second, a service worker, and it actually uses React DOM packages method, aka a function that's being delivered to us by React DOM package that's imported here, that gets ran and invoked instantly. And what it actually passes in the first parameter is code. This could be like even just a div, you know, a div, two divs here, or one div here, sorry, that has, you know, hi in it. And that's all that would actually be rendered in our application. As you can see, it just gets added here. But we're actually rendering a full component, class component that is coming from our file that Create React app delivered. And then the second argument is using the standard JavaScript document object model, which it is referencing document and using the method getElementById, which getElementById has to take in whatever the ID name is of where it's going to inject the component or the HTML or the JSX, you could say, that is actually going to be rendered into the view that we see. So in this case, that's what we're doing. We are taking this whole app and we are injecting it into the HTML at the div of root, which you can see this whole thing is at. Now, there is also the ability to install via extensions on your browser. There should be some extensions that you can use via more tools. Oh, actually not in here, but in your actual web browser. In Chrome, there should be extensions. And you can actually go to React, and there are React developer tools that you can install and enable. And the reason we do that is because when we open up our dev tools using Option Command J, we should open up to a console. You can see that now that they're enabled, we have React available as an extension. And this is cool because instead of just targeting the elements, which is just the standard HTML, which you can see we only really have one div here that's doing all of this stuff inside of it and breaking down to HTML, we actually have a React component. And React DevTools will allow us to target individual items and find out where they are in hierarchy in relativity to actual components. So this is very useful. There are a ton of different things here, but that is something you might want to have if you're ever creating a React application. So we can see that we have app is being rendered, and there's a number of things. If we actually look at app in source, we can see we are this is all bootstrapped by Create React App. It just gives us a starter to go. It is importing in React and specifically separating out components so for tree shaking, which I'm not going to cover right now, so don't worry about that. We are importing in a logo, which is an SVG file. This could be a PNG, JPEG. It doesn't have to be an SVG. That's just what they're giving us. And a CSS style for app, which exists right here. You can see this is a class-based React component. And the reason why we don't have to say React.component is because we abstract it here. And all it is rendering using the render method and returning JSX, which JSX is specific to React, but it is allowing us to render HTML with JavaScript injected. It's a very interesting and awesome and powerful and fun once you've used it quite a bit syntax, you could say. For example, here we actually import the logo as logo and we give it a name of logo. So for the source, instead of having a hard-coded string, we are just giving it this logo because we can open up curly braces to indicate that this is JavaScript and reference this package or this particular import. So that being said, this is where all of that is coming from, is from app. And if we actually look at the structure of this, you can see that index is importing an app, and then the logo is here, and there's also what is called a service worker. So service worker, I'm not going to get into it in great depth, but service workers are doing some things behind the scenes for offline capabilities, as well as it makes it faster when for subsequent visits in production. There's a lot of things that go on here. Some people really like service workers. Other people think that they're, they don't like them. They give them issues in their projects. But ideally, we would want a service worker. And so in this case, we have a service worker provided by Create React App as well. We also are given a git ignore file, which once we, since this is, an initialized project, not a git initialized project, but essentially likely we would have this in Git, we'd want to make sure that none of these items actually get saved into where we would store them. For example, node modules, because if we did, we'd have all of these would show up there, and that'd be way too much code to commit or to put up to GitHub. Ignore my history. This is my own thing here. You can delete that. And you can see that we have, it doesn't show changes yet because we aren't set up with GitHub for source control. And then we also get a README file, which is going to open up here and just show you that this is just exactly telling you what you can run and what you can do for building and ejecting if you want to to opt out of the updates because it can't go back. Talks a little bit about some other things. It gives some links for code splitting and making a progressive web app, etc. So now that we have this particular application running, we might actually want to structure it for it to be more useful in production before we actually initialize it with GitHub. So what we're actually going to do is inside of our source file, we're going to create two directories. The first is going to be components, and the second, which we don't want to be inside of that, we want to rename this because it got named incorrectly. Actually, we'll just create a new one. And we will call it views. And so we have a component that we want to make sure is inside a source. So we have two new directories, components and views, and there's nothing in them right now. What we would like to have is actually inside of views, we would like to have a highest level view, which is our app view. And we want all of these files that have to do with app or that are used in app in this directory, along with the SVG that is required to render it. Now VS Code will actually update imports for you if you want. But in this case, the reason why we abstract this into a view is because ideally the benefit of React is that we can break up things into components, like the tiniest component, and reuse different components and have different components that we create different views from. And we'd like to have organization between right now, even though there's no data in our application, just straightforward architecture of components and views. And we might have multiple views that we route between via app, etc. So right now we've moved everything over there. But if we actually go back to our actual application, you can see that it is updated. That is only because Visual Studio Code in the index.js updated my import automatically, and that's specific to VSC, but you would have to come in here and update this to not be ./app, but to be ./views/app/app. You can also update your project to have sourcing where it'll just be, you won't need to use ./, you can just say views, or you can say component, etc. So that being said, we have an app view. We don't have any components yet, so we're going to create a component. And we're just going to call this component hello.js. And we're going to use a snippet to create a React component, which my snippet for global is RCP. And you can see it is creating a React component using a snippet, so I don't have to type all this manually. And I'm going to call this hello. And we aren't using prop types as a package yet, so we don't need to have that included in this component. So we just basically have a simple component that has no actual state, has a render method that returns JSX of a div that says hello. And we are going to simply export this out here as export default. Some people prefer to have it at the end where it says export default and then the class here as practice, and instead of exporting it up there, they do this. That is also a very, it just depends on where you're going, but stylistically it's the same thing. You're just either exporting it directly here or you're just exporting it lower to make it cleaner. I particularly like to have it export above, even though that may not be the style of where I work or where anybody else or what other people do. Some things are stylistic preferences, and there will be camps. So it's important to know that that's not something that's required for us to do. The only thing that's actually required is to make sure that at least we export out what we are creating. Now what we want to do is in our app.js file, we want to actually import in this component. And the point of why we're doing this is to show that the point of components is so that we can create components so that we can use them in views. And you might have components that are their own directory, similar to how we have a view of app in its own directory. And therefore you could have multiple components that make up a main component. You might have reusable components, and you might have components that are not reusable, that are customized for a particular view, but they should all live in the component directory. That being said, we're going to actually import hello from the actual location, and you can see we can kind of select here // that's not nested enough. We aren't going to be inside of apps, so we know that we're going to have another nested amount of data. And here you can see now we're at the right location for components and what kind of component we want to actually get hello. So we could have an indexed.js file that imports all of the components in this directory and then exports them all out so that we can use them. And also, again, like I said, we can have the file path changed. I'm not going to talk about how to set that up. But right now we have a hello component that we have imported into our app view. And maybe we want this hello to just show up where this logo is, where the header is. So we're going to go ahead and actually use this hello component here. And because we aren't passing it anything, we have no props. And because we aren't actually putting anything inside of it, similar to like a regular div, we can just go ahead and just use the self-closing tag syntax that is provided to us via JSX. We'll go ahead and save this. And if we go back to our project, we should be able to see that hello is now inside of our app.js view. So this is kind of the architecture. It's a great structure. This is not the architecture of additional aspects like data management for Redux or any other data management package. That would go in other directories that you would create inside of source. But at this point, we have about 16 file changes. A bunch of those are actually coming from this history that I have. That's basically I want to ignore history. So ideally, instead of just continually deleting those, I might go back to my actual gitignore file and have under the miscellaneous ./history or .history. All right. And I think that worked. So now we have a project, but the issue is that we don't actually have a repository created. So we are going to go back to GitHub, and we're going to create a repository to link this to. We want to make sure that the name matches our actual project that we created using the React application, which is React Demo in this case. And we don't want it to have anything because we want essentially there to be nothing. So we're just going to create this repository. And now we want to go ahead and set our current local directory to actually be the code that is this. So we're going to add this to an existing project. So we should already have Git initialized and we already have the files there, but we want to actually add an origin. So we want to set this to the remote repository URL, which is this. So we're going to copy this. And in our terminal, we could do it inside of VSC because we have this now. And I'm going to go ahead and do that. So I'm opening up a terminal inside of this editor, or else you would use it in a standard terminal that is outside of this environment. And we are going to go ahead and get the actual specific command. Let's just make sure that we have it precisely. Is git remote add origin. Remote add origin. And then we want to paste that there. And now we actually have this corresponding, it doesn't say success, but there's no error. So we know that now when we commit these changes and basically stage the changes that are different than what we have right here, which is essentially nothing, we can commit them and then push those commits to update our repository. So the reason why I like using VSC versus typing in git status and looking at what files are here is because I like the GUI, because I can click and see if there was a change in an individual file. I can actually see the differences real quickly by clicking on it, as well as if I wanted to add all but maybe one particular item to staging for the commit, I can just do that with the graphic user interface of plus. Or if I have something that I want to completely undo after I did look at the difference, I can use this to delete it. But in this case, we are actually sending everything here, including some modified files like the git ignore and the index, as well as additional new files, our new hello component. And then we actually removed these and relocated them, you could say. So we're going to provide our commit message, which is going to be initialize, let there be code. And in this case, we might even actually use a handy dandy top hat to describe ourselves and how proud we are of actually using this. So we'll go ahead and just use that in there, as these emojis are applicable to our commit messages. And we are now at stage. So if we go to git status here to see what it would look like in the other side, you can see that we have all of these files added to staging, ready to be committed. We're going to go ahead and accept our commit, and that has now been committed. However, if we go back to our project and reload, you can see that, of course, there isn't anything changed because we have not pushed the commit that we've made. So now we need to actually push our commit, and we can do that by simply coming in here. And since we are on this branch, all we have to do is git push. Now the thing is it's saying it has no upstream, so we want to say git push origin master. And because of the initialization we did to the URL before, when we do git push origin master, it is setting up that origin. And now we can simply do git push. But now if we actually go back to our code and reload it in GitHub, all of our code is existing and we have all of the files that we could expect in our repository, which is fantastic. So that being said, we've set up our product, our application. We may want to go add some different packages into our product for usability. So I'm going to close everything here, and I'm going to actually minimize the terminal for a moment and go back to our slides. And so we have here the power of packages and tools. Specifically, we have different tools we might use for managing data. Tools for styling our project and having themes and not just colors, but actual style to different components, etc., like styled components. We might have even a query data layer like GraphQL to make it easier to abstract data into our components, wrapping RESTful APIs or creating our own APIs. We'd use something like reach routers, so we could client-side route different navigation to different components. So if somebody selects a specific link, for example, that we would actually render a entirely different component, or in this case, maybe in our project, an entirely different view that we might create. And then we have packages like TypeScript or Flow or prop types, where we can do some type checking to ensure that, for example, the data that comes in is what is expected. So in a situation like this, we might need something like prop types to specify when you come to this component what data it should be receiving. It's not imported in here. And the reason for that is because at this moment we don't actually have any that node package management dependency installed. On NPM, we can get access to a ton of different packages. For example, one may be Lodash, and you can see that each of these are packages that are essentially a ton of code that has been is maintained, hopefully, and deployed and updated regularly by collaborators on GitHub, and they're tools that you can use in your project. Ideally, you want to make sure that you aren't using too many dependencies that would bloat your project that you aren't using. So if, for example, you're only using Lodash for one small thing that you could probably create for yourself in your project versus importing the entire project, if the project doesn't allow you to use tree shaking or be able to do code splitting and import it in just that particular part of the package, your package in production could still get bloated, and we'd like to have as little code as possible in the production environment. So in this case, maybe we've decided that we are going to use a package, and the package that we'd like to have is reach router. So if we actually go here, we can see that reach router is a powerful directory that is created by Brian Florence that allows us to do client-side routing. There's a bunch of information on this documentation. If you've used React Router version 4, this is kind of like the next and newest level of that, with improvements using the newer context API. It's compatible with 15 plus version for React. It's more accessible, literally, and just it's simpler, and it's essentially like a rewrite of React Router 4 if you think about it. So maybe we want React Router for routing. So at this point, we can run the command npm I -- save, and we will actually call in the name that is specific. This one's a little weird because it has the @ in it. In most packages that I've installed in general, on average they don't seem to have that, but his does. So it is @reach router /router, and so now we are actually installing into via npm via our package JSON, which is like our npm package management actual file. We are actually bringing in all of the code that is required to use this package in here, and you can imagine that this is very powerful for having a ton of different packages that you can bring in. Like for example, one that you might use in a very advanced environment where you have a lot of data and you want to display it to the user is using something that is created for you, like a library like Nevo, to actually plug data into D3 components that have been pre-built. So for example, maybe you want something that is going to show response. I guess you could show some kind of data using maybe a chart like this, a line chart, and you can see that this is really cool D3 built component and library, and we can click roll the dice here to kind of see it animate and see different data be poured into here. But maybe we want to use something like this, or we want to have access to a ton of different components that are already pre-built that we can customize, like a package like Material UI that actually has a ton of different components. Like for example, maybe you don't want to actually write something that is from scratch for chip, and you want to use this, you can actually use their package and they will show you how you would do that and how it would be used, and you can look at how to customize things. And this is how you could set up different themes, and you could have tooltips, and these are just different components that have been created. There's also React Semantic UI, which is like an alternative to Material UI. And so that's maybe another package we'd want to use. In this case, maybe we want to use Material UI, so we'll go ahead and install Material UI. And you can see that there's actually quite a bit of Material UI here. So instead, I'm actually going to use React. Let's see here. Semantic UI. That looks good. npmi, oops. npmi / save, and it is going to be React Semantic UI. So now we have two packages in here that are maybe two to express some things we might do. We might bring in some components and create some different views with these components that are coming from a library. We might route those components using a dependency from npm like reach router. And all of these are maintained in different versions, so you don't have to go up in the version if there's a bug or something, or it's newer. You can wait and let it be persistent. We are at 16.8.2 for React, so we can use hooks in production. Hooks are they were provided in 16.7 version, so you can see that the newest one of React's hooks are no longer just a proposal. They are actually in React's version as of a version, and I guess 0.2 of a version. Or semantics versioning. Yeah, I'm not going to go into that. So basically we have a product, we have some packages we could use. We're not going to use that. At this point we've discussed the code itself. Maybe we'd actually flesh out and spend more time in the code and write and create a more robust project. Instead we just want to update the changes and specify that we have added reach router and React Semantic UI package, or we can say dependencies. And we can use command return to just do that versus clicking if we don't want to. And then we can push this. And so now our project is updated on GitHub to have those packages available if we'd like to add them into our application. Now the next step here is we are going to go ahead and actually deploy this. So we've already got it on GitHub and now we want to deploy it. We want to maybe use a tool that's really cool for actually for deploying products, and this is called Netlify. Netlify is a incredible way to build, deploy, and manage modern web projects in production. And it's not specific to just GitHub, it's specific to Git. So you can have projects that are deployed in Netlify from Bitbucket or GitLab. You can choose what branch you're using for production. Because ideally in a real world environment, if this was a project that we were going to open source to be worked on, we would only have master branch be the branch that we deploy to production, and we'd have different branches that we would work off of. So that being said, we are going to go ahead and actually deploy this application to production. So first you're going to have to log in or sign up. In this case, I am signing in, and it's automatic because I just signed in not too long ago. So it's not asking me for like GitHub or OAuthing in via Gmail, GitHub, etc. And you can see I have a number of different just like little things that are deployed to Netlify for right now on this account as a side thing. We're going to do new site from Git, and we're going to specify GitHub because that is where our code is deployed right now in that project. And it is authorized, but we can see we don't see our React demo application here. So we need to configure this on GitHub and give Netlify the access to the repository that we need. So now that we're logged in, you can see that underneath our personal settings, we need to give access to specific repositories to Netlify. We can even uninstall Netlify if we wanted. And so we need to select the repository that we have, which is the React demo repository. And we want to click save, I think, so that you can see it here. And very quickly, that is going to update Netlify, and you can see that now React demo is accessible for creating a new site. We are going to have continuous deployment from GitHub, and we are going to go ahead and select what we want to deploy. We can choose the branch. We don't have any different branches, but we would always want ideally our master branch to be what's deployed into production, not what we commit or push directly to. But right now we can commit and push to it directly because we're just initializing the project. So you can see that the site deploy is in progress. We get this interesting name that is random. In this case, it's a boring beaver, which is how I feel right now about myself. and we can manage different productions and see what is being deployed to production. There is quite a bit of tooling that Netlify has to offer, like deploys, functions, identity forms, split testing. There is even ability to get a lot of analytics from your deployment. You can even change your domain or site settings. You could have a custom URL so that the URL that gets provided here is not what is currently what they're going to give us as a URL. But essentially this is now deployed, and we can manage our build process, and we have a React application that should look like this that is deployed in production. And so there we are, it's finished its job, and now we can set up a custom domain, secure it with HTTP, but instead we're just going to go ahead and open this up. And you can see now that this is an actual deployed version of what is most updated on our master branch. And so if we're working remotely on our project, we can make changes to a specific branching off of a specific branch that is not master, and then we could push those commits to GitHub, push them into that branch, and then eventually merge that branch into our master branch. And then master branch would get all of those updates, push all of those updates via deployment through Netlify, and update our live URL site. So that is us actually updating everything that we need to update for deploying from the ground straight to architecting a beginner React application. The packages aren't provided, but of course that is everything that you might need. If you have further questions, you can definitely reach out to me. This is my information. I have Twitter. I don't check that too often as I'd like. My GitHub account is pretty straightforward. My YouTube channel, I'm trying to hit 100 subscribers so that I can actually have a custom URL so it's easier to tell people or what to go to. You can also connect with me on LinkedIn or email me specific questions. And again, thank you for joining the workshop. Hopefully this was a little bit smoother step-by-step process that you can follow that's recorded. And ideally, the whole point is to kind of give you a high-level understanding of React. The advanced React aspect is going to come in when you start including different components and building out components and determining what kind of components you'd like to build. We are also in the point where we can now use in React is called hooks, which allows us to create functional components that are not class-based components, but still allow us to manage and change state in using a number of different things, different hooks that we can use, so that we can use more functional-based components that still have logic included, and try to hopefully get away from class components and do everything in hooks via functional hook components. So that's pretty much it. As far as resources, there are a few resources that I will be sending. I will be sending you the link to the React documentation, the Create React App documentation, so you can read that. It'll also give you information about different things, like if you're looking at building or installing a dependency, you can see how it will say that and it'll specify that. It is using certain things under the hood that you may want to know more about. You can look through here and find what those tools are, such as Webpack, and figure how to configure certain things. And really the demo is just to show you everything. You should dig into this in depth and go through all of this, and maybe even take a real true course or get curriculum from a boot camp or whatever you're doing to really truly learn and practice building React applications and components. But this is pretty much everything there is to getting a deployed product that we can deliver and use. I'll also link this just in case you've forgotten how to connect things, and Netlify is there, and as well as the Create React App actual source code, so you can, if you wanted to see how they're doing some things under the hood, you could. I hope this is very helpful. Step by step is the way to go. As far as actually working in React and creating a React application, I highly recommend just getting to it. Just get your hands dirty, start messing around. VS Code is a great IDE of choice. I've been using this a long time. And as far as, you know, different tools for that, the auto import is great. Just in case you move something around, it'll automatically update the imports for that particular import of whatever file you're importing. So have some fun with this. I hope this is helpful. I know that it was a little bit lengthy, but I wanted to do a video of outside the workshop of me doing this step by step that you can follow and pause at any point in time and run on your own machine. So thank you for watching and have a great day.